Welcome to the Sentient Sky, a podcast on astrology, the cycles, and sacred intelligence.
Presented to you through a Southern Hemisphere lens by Yvonne Wildheart and Rebecca Holly.
This is our very first episode, the May 2024 Astrological forecast.
Welcome to the first episode of the Sentient Sky. My name is Becky.
And I am Yvonne.
And we are meeting here on the 25th of April at 2 p.m.
To begin with, before we do anything else, we're going to start with our invocation. So I invite you, if you're feeling called to, just closing your eyes and just opening up your body and opening up your chest and taking a deep breath in and out as we call in this work, this invocation, as we spiral from the center of our being, the void space within our very cells. We open up to your ever-expanding portal of galactic wisdom, knowledge, and consciousness. We call for full illumination of our unique universal map, our imprint of time and space. We call the stars, the planets, and all the spaces in between to speak to us and through us with crystalline clarity. May this transmission of galactic proportion shift us through the veils, expanding us beyond the realms of infinite creation. May we feel safe and held as we transmit this cosmic coding through our earthly vessels in service to the greater good of all beings. As we deeply remember that we are galactic citizens, ever-evolving conduits of the cosmic matrix, fulfilling our soul's mission and our beloved earth at this time. And so it is, and blessed be. And I'll just light the candle that will hold us as we journey through this month's astrology. Thank you.
Thank you. And so today we are meeting under the divine patronage of Jupiter on Jupiter's day and hour, and we humbly call on the almighty Jupiter's wisdom and capacity for growth and temperance, and request their guidance as we navigate this transmission of the month to come. Thank you for being here, Jupiter.
Thank you, Jupiter. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Yvonne Wildheart, and I'm coming to you from Jojo Wurrung country in Central Highlands, Victoria, in Australia. I am an astrologist, a soul alchemist. I'm a shamanic woman crafter and a mother of four. And that is me.
And my name is Rebecca, and I am here on Bunurong country. I am an astrologer, a naturopath and folk herbalist, a tarot reader and teacher, and mama to my sweet 3-year-old daughter. And our intention for the Sentient Sky podcast is to connect with and deliver astrological wisdom in a way that is embodied, accessible, intentional, and transformative, while equally honoring and incorporating both the mundane and the magical. We are also committed to weaving the Southern Hemisphere experience of the cycles into our work. It's something we're both very excited to be bringing in an effort to cultivate a more connected and lived connection with astrological language.
So welcome. Here we are. So we're going to, this is a little overview of what we're going to be talking about today. We are so excited. We've been planning for this for months and probably talking about it for years. So we're going to start off with a transit summary of what has happened and what is going to be happening this month in the stars. We're going to bring some keywords into it so we can hold that as we journey through the major transits list, which we will go through. And then at the end, we'll wrap up and have our final thoughts and have a quick look at what's happening for June. Can you believe it? Here we are in May already. What a month it has been. Wowzers.
So much more to come still as well. It was such a big month in April and still so much to unfold. And something that's really important while you're listening to us speak is to know that some of what we share is going to resonate really fully, and trusting that even if you don't fully understand the language, there is enough that your cells understand that your heart will hold that. And also trusting that some of it may not resonate at all, and that will pass to and through you with ease, and that too is perfect and okay. If you do want to send through any questions, or we're talking about something that you want to understand a little bit more deeply, jump on our Patreon, The Sentient Sky, leave a question for us there, and we will happily answer it for you. And while you're listening, if you're wondering, is this transit going to be particularly meaningful for me and for my own chart, then just keep in mind particularly your sun, your moon, and your rising signs, and see what kind of matchups there are there. And of course, we will unfold what will be pinging what as we go along. And lastly, and very importantly, all of our transits are in AEST, Australian Eastern Standard Time. It is such a pleasure to say that. It's so nice to be working from that Southern Hemisphere perspective. So all of our transits will be based on AEST.
Yes, and if you have your chart, if you have your astrological natal chart, there's an invitation to bring it out. We use whole sign houses, but you just go with whatever resonates with you. But have your chart out so you can follow along. And if you don't know what the hell we're talking about, write us a question into our Patreon. We can share a link to how to find your natal chart and what that is all about. But please, we invite you to come and have a conversation with us if this is, if you have no idea what we're about. Okay. All right. So let's begin. This first of all, just a quick sort of what's happened through April in the lead up of how we got here in the first place. We've just come out of eclipse season. We've had a major, a big 14-year transit of Jupiter and Uranus coming together. Uranus, the planet of revolution and sudden changes and electricity, with Jupiter, the planet of expansion and stretching out and seeing how far we can take it, because it's endless out there in Jupiterian world, given that this podcast is a Jupiterian dedication. And what we were talking about before we started recording is Chiron being, a big player in the last few months as well. So, but what's coming up for this month, just a quick summary. We have Mercury, which is coming out of retrograde. Oh no, what's now? Hang on, what are we doing? Here we go. Yeah.
Let's go over some of our key themes and weave all of that in as well. As when we're recording this, Mercury is stationing direct. So you will have to forgive us. That is not a request, it is a demand for the Mercury retrograde faux pas that we will absolutely commit in the recording of this episode. But by the time you are listening to this, he will have stationed direct. But some of the key themes that we had come up with before we started recording for this month to come in May is that of reignition, that we are reigniting energy and enthusiasm, and that comes through a number of different transits and movements that are happening, not just one. So this reignition of our energy, this reclaiming of our enthusiasm and our capacity to take action based on all that we know now. So after everything that's happened in this last month, what do we do now? And this month of May really gifts us with a lot of the action and the potential energy to be able to make change based on that new knowledge.
Yeah, there's lots of fast-moving transits this month. We've got Mars finally moving into its home sign of Aries. We've got a Pluto retrograde straight off the bat coming in the Southern Hemisphere. We've got the earthly point of Samhain or Halloween. Yes, that's right. It is actually in the Southern Hemisphere. The end of April, the start of May. It is like the point between autumn equinox and winter solstice, which we will be talking about. We have a Mercury going into Taurus. We have the sun going into Gemini. We have a Sagittarius full moon coming up. We have Venus going into Gemini, Jupiter going into Gemini as well. We just move really, really fast, which is really interesting because we come into this month on a Taurus new moon, which is fixed Earth. So things get moving, things get, I don't know, it's just happens. There's a lot happened this month, and lots going to happen this month. So
Absolutely. And I think that one of the big contrasts that we'll notice as we talk about May is that where last month was so much about unveiling and looking at things in new and having to look at things that maybe we didn't want to see or things that were difficult to confront. And the difference this month is, yeah, that action of like, now what do we do with that? And potentially too with redirection of what, do I keep on going down the same path and just ameliorate things as I go? Or actually, do I need a whole new direction? Because there's definitely no going back. There is no putting the skeleton back in the closet it fell out of, which is
True
absolutely.
story.
Yep, absolutely an eclipse gift. Here is a skeleton. Try fitting this one back in the closet, sisters. That's
Good
not
luck.
how that works. There are things that
No.
can't be unseen after last month. And so how do we pivot from that place?
So
And then
sorry.
no, that's okay. And so those other key themes of what now, like what happens now. And then as you were saying, Yvonne, that beautiful big Saggy full moon that's coming up, that really encourages us to dream big. And so these four key themes of reignition, redirection, what now, and then through all of that, also dreaming big and not hesitating to let our imagination really run wild with what we can pull through and create and believe in, to not be held back by perhaps beliefs or old wounds that just no longer fit anymore, as they may have done even just a couple of months ago.
No, there's absolutely no going back. In actual fact, we've been through a massive rebirthing process in the last few months. And here we are at the start of May. Things are different, as Becky said. And, rebirth, what now, and dream big is the key themes for May coming up. Shall we get into it?
Let's.
Yay. All right. So I'm going to bring up the chart out for our first transit that we're going to be looking at, which is
I think we're going to begin with the ingress of Mars into Aries. Is that right?
Yes, that's it.
On the 3rd of May.
The 1st of May.
Oh, the 1st of May. Apologies. There we go. And so for those of you watching rather than listening along without the visual, what we're looking at here is the red Mars sigil at 0000, which indicates that Mars has just moved from Pisces into Aries. And when any planet moves from one sign into another, it's a big moment, but this transition from Pisces to Aries is a particularly special transition. And the reason for that is because Pisces is the last or 12th sign of the zodiac and Aries is the first. And so whenever a planet crosses this threshold from the oldest to the newest, it is truly moving through a portal of rebirth. And so we've just in this last couple of months had lots and lots of the personal planets all come through and move into the beginning of the zodiac again, ready to take another turn on that spiral. And on the 1st of May, it will be Mars's turn to do that. So there's a real rebooting and refreshing happening with Mars, but what makes it extra potent is that Aries is where Mars is it's where it's at home, it's in its domicile. And so not only is that a potent point of the zodiac to be moving through, it's also a moment where Mars can kind of go, oh, home at last, and feel more settled and to start gathering its energy, ready to act and make decisions out in the world.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting about this, it's still having a conversation with Neptune here in Pisces. So this dreaming of, is this real or is it not? But it's in the last point, Neptune's so close to the end and Neptune's in its home sign here as well. And so this coming with Aries, I mean, Mars going into Aries, it's like, yes, something new is beginning here, but it feels like this foot into both worlds. It's like, well, can I believe it yet, even though I'm here? But because there's still that conversation happening with, this expandable, unbounded Neptune in Pisces that doesn't feel real about this Mars being in Aries. Can we really believe that Mars is finally in Aries? All, the personal planets are now outside of this conversation with Pluto, I mean, with Pisces. And it's, in the last, since, February, we've had Venus, Mercury, Sun, and Mars all coming through, having a conversation with Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune. That's been pretty heavy going. And it feels like with Mars coming into Aries like this, it's like, oh, it feels still there's a lot of residue hanging back behind us, and not really believing that we've just had this transformational transitions of these big last signs of the zodiac that have really, really thrown up some things for us to look at and to clear out before we can step into something new. But there feels like, we can't quite believe it yet because of this conversation still with Mars and Neptune as well. And this sextile here, with the moon in Pluto that Mars and Neptune are having.
Yeah, very much so. And one of the ways I can visualize this Mars ingress moment is when a planet crosses a sign boundary from one sign to the other, it's like stepping foot, like opening the door to a new home or a new area of life, stepping both of your feet into the new sign and turning around, and you're getting ready to close the door, but you haven't quite closed the door yet. And that's where like those mists and tendrils of Neptune are still kind of swirling at Mars's feet a little bit. So even though Mars has like moved out of that Pisces territory, there is still those lingering threads, those lingering mists that kind of has to be like shook off a little bit while Mars gets ready to close that door and really begin the journey through Aries.
Yeah, absolutely. And this 60-degree angle between the moon and Pluto, which are here, the early degrees of Aquarius, this fixed earth sign. And still it feels like what we said, like still this lagging of energy that is still trying to have this conversation of going, of Mars wanting something new in cardinal fire, this spark of the star of the zodiac, but yet there's still things happening behind the scenes, or, maybe ancestral baggage that we still need to attend to as before we move forward, or, there's things here that still needed to be attended to behind us or from the past.
Absolutely. And I think that really fits with some of our senses of what this month means as a whole. It's like, now that we know what we know, like bringing forward these things of where we've been and what we know from the past, what now? And this is a moment between that. It's a moment where we can't or haven't quite made the action yet, but we can feel the separation from what has been. And the moon is really special in terms of the 7 classical planets because it's the closest heavenly sphere to the Earth. It is really related to and responsible for materializing the energies and themes of the planet. So whenever the moon is in aspect with another planet, it makes it more lived, more obvious, more tangible, more alive, more literal. The volume gets turned up a little louder. And even though a sextile is a relatively gentle aspect compared to, say, a square or a trine or a conjunction or an opposition, it's the gentler of the classic aspects. The moon is still offering this materialization of Mars's themes because they are in conversation with each other through that sextile. So, and that sextile really holds that energy of the first signs of emergence. So it's that seedling just starting to crack through. So while Mars begins the journey through Aries, the moon is really importing that beginning into the material world. And that could could be quite felt. So particularly for those of you who are truly children of Mars, whether that is to have Aries or Scorpio as your rising sign, or where your sun or moon are, people who have lots of planets in Aries, Scorpio, or even Capricorn to a point, because that's where Mars finds its exaltation, where it's in a position of great power. That, yeah, if you're connected with the signs, particularly of Aries, Scorpio, and Capricorn in your own natal chart, this could be a really lived sense of the wind hitting your sails and of energy starting to come in, not completely in this moment on this day, but over the next couple of days in particular, you might start to find a building of heat and warmth and enthusiasm, where that might not have been present for potentially some time, particularly through Pisces, which can be a bit heavy and weighed down and murky with Saturn and Neptune there. So this is really, particularly for children of Mars, people with prominent martial placements, this could be a real game-changing felt moment.
Absolutely. And actual fact, also to keep in mind that this Pluto up here is like pretty much at a stop. It's about to station retrograde a couple of days later on the 3rd of May. So there's an emphasis here of this platonic, deep down, hidden, but also the rich gold that is being laying underneath all the things that have been stirred up. It's like that. Can we now bring it up to have a look? And do we need to really, and that's what you said, like the skeleton of the closets are being opened is like, well, what are we going to do with this now? And we need to go back and have a bit of a review of how we're going to dispose the skeleton appropriately. Or is there like a hidden treasure that the skeleton's sitting on that we can to bring up? And then what are we going to do with that? So yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very much so. And just to really reiterate how much the moon truly imports whatever it's touching or in conversation with, the moon and Pluto at this moment are only 2 degrees away from each other. And it's what's called an applying aspect. So when one planet is applying towards another, it means it's moving toward, it means that there's anticipation of that meeting happening. And that meeting will be happening only a couple of hours away from this moment. So probably around like 4 or 5 a.m. on the 1st of May, that meeting will be exact, and the moon will be like truly importing those Pluto themes, as she does whenever she is in conjunction with any of the planets. And so, yeah, it is this simultaneous, hitting the refresh button with Mars, but also recognizing that we can no longer pretend that skeleton isn't there, or that the skeleton's not really a skeleton. It's something else that I've, made a different story, so I don't have to relate to that anymore. But yeah, perhaps this is also a real opportunity, for the sake of moving forward and beginning well. Maybe it's a real opportunity to honor the bones that until now you have not been willing to really honor or look at or admit to or tend. Like, can we use this moment as an opportunity to bow low to something that frightens us, or that has haunted us, or that has brought about an ordeal for better or worse? Can we bow low to that, so that when we rise back up, we're even more ready to begin with this Mars energy? I think that that has the potential to be a real gift. And I think that that self-honesty is something that Pluto calls for all month. All month long, we see these aspects happening with the personal planets and Pluto. So all month long, you're being asked to honor that skeleton. And this is just the beginning of that.
It's only the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very powerful. Okay. All right. Stop. Share. So the next chart that we want to have a look at is, yes. So in the Southern Hemisphere, we have the point between autumn equinox and winter solstice, which is an actual astrological point for the Earth. And it is here in the Southern Hemisphere, it is Samhain or Halloween. And despite what we get told in the Southern Hemisphere, that Halloween is on the 30th of October. That is incorrect here in the Southern Hemisphere. In the Northern Hemisphere, it is on October the 31st. But for here, it is, no, wrong chart, my apologies.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because those celebrations are specific to the season that's being experienced at the time. That's why we carve pumpkins, is because at that time of year, pumpkins are abundant because it's late autumn and coming into that early winter. It is honoring and reflecting that seasonal moment of endings as all the leaves come down from the tree and we get ready to go in that more dormant time of the year coming into winter. It's a moment to really honor what's been lost or what we're letting go of, what kind of transitions and transformations and stripping back is happening. And so even though, a month ago we were all, not that we were all, but, potentially a lot of us would have been celebrating Easter and having Easter egg hunts and having pictures of bunnies everywhere, like all these springtime fertile symbols, which are not so much in alignment with the Southern Hemisphere experience of the seasons. And so really what we have an opportunity for here is to be connecting seasonally and seeing how we can line the astrological moment in time with our lived experience as well.
Absolutely. And what I find, so here in the Southern Hemisphere, and I mean, this is also the case of the Northern Hemisphere, but they're going into high spring, which is Beltane. Here in the Southern Hemisphere, we are obviously coming into Samhain. We're coming into that last harvest of this season. We're deep in autumn. In actual fact, on the Earth wheel, this would symbolize the beginning of winter. So this point between autumn equinox and winter solstice, this point where the veils are the thinnest between us and the ancestors, the third and final harvest, is the final letting go. And what I find really interesting, so this chart is on the exact point of that point between autumn equinox and winter solstice, which is May the 5th here in Australian Eastern Standard Time at 9 a.m. on the dot is the exact point between autumn equinox and winter solstice. And just looking at this chart, what I find really interesting of that moon that we spoke about, just the last chart when Mars went into Aries, has now moved from this point where it was having a conversation with Pluto, which is now in retrograde. So you can see this R there. That means it's now going backwards from an Earth perspective. It's actually not going backwards in the sky, but from an Earth perspective, it is looking like it's going backwards. If you were looking at it from a telescope from the Earth, has now moved. This moon now is with Mars. How funny. Right at this very, same degree that Mars was in a few days ago when it ingressed into Aries. And look, it's also coming back going, yeah, well, this sextile energy, this 60-degree point of these new seedlings that we're seeing from, what I'm seeing from this chart, and I really love it. It's like this veil between the ancestors. That's like, for example, on this chart would be Pluto, this platonic, what we said about the skeletons in the closet, or the things that have been swept under the carpet that have been gifted down the lineage, down the storyline from mother to child to and so forth, is now here in this space here at Samhain. And we're now going, well, what seeds do we want to take with us from those ancestral stories and plant something new for the children, the next generation to come? It's this very actual powerful chart for Samhain to really actually focus on what stories do we want to now pass on for our ancestral lineage going forward, given what's happening from behind. So that's really fascinating. Yeah, and the spark of the idea of Aries, something brand new, like the little seed that we're holding in our hand that's so precious, that's been actioned by Mars here, that wants to take it and start sprouting and start moving forward with whatever needs to happen next. But what we've needed to do is actually go back and have a look at the old stories and really decide, do we want to take this forward or not? I think this is the key question at this Samhain, given this chart, is do we want to take these stories forward, or do we want to just not bury them, but attend to them so they don't move forward? I think this is what we're being called to do here.
Absolutely. And we can really see again how the moon imports things into reality, because the moon has brought the story from her conjunction with Pluto a couple of days earlier and brings that story into the moment when she comes into this conjunction with Mars on this day in that next couple of hours. And I think it's really important to think about this conversation from the ancestors, and really bring in the perspective of Mars here, which is, there's boldness, there's bravery, there's courage, but there's also right use of power. Like, how do we want to use that power responsibly and well? How can we be in service to our ancestors with the power that we hold by being here in this moment? And it's this moment of like, what would our ancestors do with that power, and of weaving their hopes for us, recognizing that there is a perspective and a wealth of information and understanding that our ancestors hold from the realm that they exist in, that we don't necessarily have a day-to-day connection with or view with. There's this trusting that the ancestors, I think anyway, have this larger scale sense of where we are, where we've been, where we're moving to, and to really trust that we can bring our sense in of like, what would make my ancestors proud? Like, what were they praying for when they were dreaming up me? And of having the martial courage and throwing our energy and our full fiery resource, that spark of yes towards that thing. I think really, like, this is not a Venusian moment. It's not a Jupiterian moment. It's a martial moment. And Pluto's bringing in that, again, that honesty, but it's the willingness to jump behind something and say yes. And, I think that Mars in Aries sometimes gets a bad rap as being impulsive. But like, can we also give ourselves permission to trust an impulse? Like, that's actually also a very precious type of magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that Mars in Aries, it's just like the Fool card, right? It's like stepping off the edge. I remember on the Astrology podcast talking about the shaming the signs, and Mars and Aries was like the audacity to move forward without a plan, to step off that cliff with because you're being called to it, not necessarily knowing where you're going. And it's like this, okay, this has happened, the past is, this Mars has had a conversation in the last couple of months with Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune, and it's really been worked over big time. Like, I just, when we were saying that about Mars, and with the elders, I just feel this Mars having a conversation with Saturn earlier this month, just after the Aries eclipse, actually, was like, well, what do you need to now to step into responsibility, this eldership? And now this Mars is now, even though it's a new Mars here in Aries, it doesn't feel like it feels like it's got some wisdom behind it, because it's had these conversations in the last couple of months with the bigger, heavier duty planets like Pluto and Saturn. It's just like, oh, it's coming through with it being worked over, and it doesn't feel like it feels like a new cycle, but with a, similar to like maybe a middle-aged man would have. It's not a new boy. It's not, it's someone who has lived a bit of a life and now is regenerating something new out of the wisdom that's come through with. And then what a classic time to be doing it, because that is the essence of Samhain and this third harvest. It's not something new. Like this time of the year here in the Southern Hemisphere, we're in deep autumn here. We've gone through, it's different energy to if it was at the start of spring, for example, and that's fresh and new. But we've gone through this whole cycle that started back at winter solstice last year, in June 22nd, I think it was, 23, we've had such a big journey since then of, this is not a new information. This is a harvest point. So it feels like this wiser Mars that's coming through with this moon just going, well, okay, this is what the new seeds we need to plant. And exactly what we were saying before of that, what are you giving down to the children? What seeds are you passing on? And another thing that stands out in this chart here, and then we'll come to that, is this Mercury, who's now direct, starting to have this conversation with Chiron, the wounded healer. And I just feel like this Mercury, wants, what is it, that stories it's trying to communicate, but this wounded healer element of going, well, this Chiron is what stories are real and what's not from the past, that, can you move above the stories, even if they're a little bit painful, but maybe they didn't come, maybe they're not true now. Maybe they were true, 20 years ago, and when that original wounding happened, but is that true now? And what stories are we telling ourselves from the past? What stories are we telling from our ancestors that are not relevant these days, or that, times are so different these days? Can we rise above that in this Aries sign of beginnings, and change the patterning of that, and become the healing of that story for the lineages going forward? Yeah.
Absolutely. And something I think that bears mentioning is that, Pluto can also be a really difficult archetypal energy to be working with. And it's one thing to connect with it, as we've been talking about, but it doesn't always show up in more constructive or positive ways. And so what I wanted to mention is that if around this time, that sense of action or using your energy, if that's feeling really held back, if there's a lot of anxiety or overwhelm or fear around how do I rightly use or be responsible for my power, I dare say that that conversation with Pluto is coming through, asking you to have a look at something or in an area that until now has been dark, or until now hasn't had your attention. And so remembering that this is a very bold, brave Mars, and you too can tune into that bold, brave self, that if this is not feeling like an empowered moment of new energy and pivoting if that's just not feeling supported, what I would invite you into is to not feel like you have to run with something for the sake of action alone, but to spend a little bit of time with those darker, edgier parts of yourselves that might be trying to get your attention through the language of anxiety or overwhelm, or past things perhaps that you thought were put to bed and were done, not quite being done. Like just really wanting to bring that into the conversation too, that yes, Pluto, gosh, it brings such profound insight, but it can also be very corrupting, and it can be enormously difficult sometimes, those energies as well. So if that is your experience at this time, then absolutely what I would recommend is to not feel the compulsion to move just because the energy is there, and to be willing to hold yourself while you address perhaps something else that is asking for your loving, wholehearted, compassionate attention, to not look away from that thing for the sake of moving forward.
Yeah. And one thing also about this chart, and what we'll move on to next, is the Taurus new moon, is that this moon here is catching up. It's in a harvest moon as well. So this potential for things to also be coming up in this final harvest of this cycle that began with the Aries eclipse, which was conjunct Chiron, the wounded healer, like with the North Node. Like it's a pretty friggin' massive eclipse, that Aries eclipse. So this is the first, this is the last harvest of whatever was stirred up there, and coming into this deep, dark point of the skies. This is in the southern hemisphere, actually, this time of year is so dark at the dark moon. It's darker than normal. It's not like a dark moon in the midsummer. It's a dark moon in the deepest, coming into the deepest of winter. and it's so dark. And so things, when we start to come internal and inside, and we're less social, things can get stirred up here, and with that connection with Pluto as well, it's like, well, what can we see from here that we need to attend to before this new moon comes in?
That's such a good point. And I think too, it's what we can see is that evidence of the layering of the same theme over and over and over again, spoken through different modes of experience, whether it's because it's almost a dark moon and it's that darker phase of the lunar cycle, whether it's because Pluto is in dialogue here, whether it's because it's Samhain, like there's so many different ways that the story is the same, which is, oh, I see that you're in this decaying, letting go, harvest moment. And then we look at something else and go, ah, I see, you're in this decaying harvest. Ah, I see. And it's this repetition of that theme. And what you were saying, Yvonne, just made me really realize that what a potent moment this is to think about, what are you bringing into winter solstice 6-8 weeks from now? Like, what can you address now while it's talking to you, before you actually get to the bottom of the underworld, before it truly is the darkest? Like, there is still light. It is dark, but there is still light at this moment. Like, what opportunity do you have to cross your T's and dot your I's in terms of your own shadow and your own sense of self that will actually support you over the coming months?
Absolutely. And when, if have a look around you to see what's arising and what's showing up. Do you really want to take that into a new cycle for the next 12 months? Like, this is your opportunity. This is what's being called of us to look at before we go into that winter solstice moment, which is the veils, which is the space of all and nothing, that is the dreaming scape. Like, it's like attending to the things that you need to attend to so you can get a good night's sleep and wake up good the next day. That's the energy. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. Okay.
And actually, just last thing.
Okay.
Oh, actually, no, I thought I saw something that I didn't. Never mind.
Okay.
It happens a lot. Oh, wait. Oh, no.
Okay.
I think that the next thing on our list to look at is probably the new moon in Taurus on the 7th, right?
That is correct. And I'll get that chart up.
This is a beautiful moment. And what I might do before that chart comes up really quickly, just so you can see it on the fuller screen, is that this is the 6 of Pentacles. And the 6 of Pentacles relates to that middle decan of Taurus, from 10 to 19 degrees of Taurus, which is where that new moon is happening. And the tarot card that relates to that little wedge is the 6 of Pentacles. And we'll talk a little bit more about the meaning of that, but I really just wanted to show the image here while you'd be able to see it clearly on the video, and we'll come back to it in a moment. But this truly is a very beautiful new moon. And I think that particularly given that we've just come out of a very, not just an intense eclipse season, but an intensely malefic eclipse season, that this new moon is a real gift and a real reprieve. And we can see that story in the 6 of Pentacles. There's a lot of mirroring there. It's very, very precious.
Yeah. So a bit about Taurus. Taurus is a fixed earth sign. So, and the glyph up here is the symbol of the bull. It's the bull who's connected deep to the earth, who is working the earth. It's ruled by Venus, and it's really interesting that Venus is now in the sign of Taurus. So Venus is in its home sign with this new moon. It's friggin' beautiful, actually. Taurus new moon here in Australia, in Eastern Australian time. I just need to emphasize that because we have a lot of astrology podcasts that are Northern Hemisphere based. So this is great that we're doing it from this perspective. On the 8th of May 2024, it's a Wednesday, and it's at 1:21 p.m. and it's at 18 degrees and 2 minutes here in Taurus.
Oh, it is actually such a freaking beautiful new moon. And like, I can see that Uranus is there 3 degrees away, but you know what? that guy's been there for 7 odd years now. Like my natal moon is also in Taurus, so I have a grudge. But I'm just going to not even look at Uranus at the moment because there's so many other beautiful things happening with this new moon. And so this new moon being in Taurus and ruled by Venus already has that energy of the seeds that we're sowing with the hope of harmony and of living in harmony with the earth and her cycles, of feeling belonged and in place. That it's also Taurus with that new moon also really holds, like, what are we doing now that is going to make us really happy at the full moon 6 months from now? Like, what are we wanting to lean into and dream into reality that is going to really contribute to our pleasure and our joy and our sensory experience of the world? And part of the reason why this is so such a potent moment is because Venus is in Taurus. And so whoever rules a particular conjunction, wherever that planet is, it will have something to say about the conjunction itself. So if Venus was on the other end down in Scorpio, opposite where this was happening in Taurus, we'd be saying, oh, this is a beautiful Venusian new moon, but Venus doesn't have a great deal of power in Scorpio. And so this is what that could look like. But here, Venus is in this lush, empress-like environment. She has everything she needs and wants at her disposal. And so that filters through to this new moon. And on top of that, the moon herself is also, in terms of planetary dignity, it's exalted in the sign of Taurus. And all that means is that she is most exalted, most lifted up, most enamored and beautiful. Whenever a planet is in its exaltation, it's in a position of great power and abundance. And so we have the planets that are in domicile and exaltation, so home and this lifted up place together at this time. It's very, very beautiful.
So beautiful. And I'm just looking at, Venus here, who's coming behind. Like, the moon has already had a conversation with Venus before it reaches this point. So in the darkness of the moon, the last part of the cycle, the moon, Venus is the last planet that the moon has a conversation with going into this new moon. And look what happens afterwards. There's change. It's like revolutionary change. It feels like that revolutionary love. And then the moon will have a conversation with Jupiter, which will expand that. Like, how friggin' beautiful is that? And it comes off the back, actually, of this Chiron and Mercury conjunction, which happens a day before. So, that dark moon is it's pretty big. The moon passes over after it's had that conversation at 7 with Mars. It then comes over the north node. It's like, well, the future, what are we wanting for the future now? Again, like what we were saying before about bringing the seeds forth for the grandchildren. But this Chiron is like like, this sort of a niggly thing. Is like, well, what are we going to do with these stories that are holding us back? And Mercury's going, well, we need to change how our mind works. We need to communicate something differently here, because Mercury now is going direct. It's moving forward, which is great. So we're needing to move forward despite those, those mad monkeys on our shoulders telling us that, whatever stories, whether it's true or not, remember that Chiron's a centaur. It's a mythical creature. Do we buy into that story, or do we know we're actually being called to make something new here in the lead up into this new moon? And then the moon has a conversation with Venus going, it's okay. Look at the beauty that is all here for us here on this earth, that we are making space for, the future beings who will walk on the earth after we've gone, this dreaming that we can come from it. And then it comes into this new moon. Like, it's so friggin' beautiful and so powerful. And one of the things that we say about moon prayers, and our both of our teachers, Jane Hardwick Collins, is a really big advocate for dark moon prayers, which is all about releasing. So in the lead up, so before 1:21 p.m., on the 8th, maybe, you know, in that morning of the 8th, you know, think about what you want to release that no longer serves, especially after that moon has spoken to Pluto and, you know, what we spoke about already. But then when it comes, so in the afternoon of the 8th, you know, really sit with what is it that you are calling in for the beauty of the earth, beauty of the, you know, the future generations that we're leaving, like we will leave, especially here at Samhain, you know, what are we leaving for the, you know, the seedings, you know, and what beauty are we calling in? And remember, it's a win-win-win is a really powerful prayer. A win for you, a win for your community and your loves, and the win for the planet, you know, centered, three-folded prayers is very, very powerful.
Yeah, and I think too, like, what an incredible moment this is, to really lean into any story. So that Mercury Chiron conjunction in Aries. So Aries is very much about the I am, the self, my right to be here, my right to exert my will. What stories have you held that have led you to believe that you are separate, or that you don't belong, or that you are not, like, the fact that we call nature nature, or the wild is actually a tool for separation in the first place. Like, we are nature, we are that wildness in human form. And I think that this new moon that visits Venus in Taurus is such an opportunity to lean into that harmonious Venus that says, remember you are belonged, remember your deep roots, remember all the things that have led to this moment of you being here and now. And that Mercury Chiron, it's that challenge of the intellect of, can I lean into my heart? Can I lean into my bodied experience of belonging and connection and of belonging to the land? Can I lean into that with enough trust and to turn the volume on those old stories down, so that I'm no longer kidding myself that I don't belong, or that I'm not connected, or that there you know, that there's no love for me here? Like, that Venus in Taurus is that reminder of just how much love there is available to us, and that actually the only barrier is us forgetting. The only barrier is that we don't remember how available that is.
Absolutely. I have a good story about that Taurian community that Taurus is in my 11th house of community, which is really, really interesting, because when Jupiter first moved into Taurus in this cycle back this time last year, my expansion of understanding of what community is just went like, wow, our community is actually also the trees and the stars and, you know, the water and all the animals. Like, when we have been so fucking programmed to think that we are separate, or humans are superior, or, you know, there's something there about this, what you said, Becky, about this separation that we've been and it's a program. It is actually. And when you take that, lift that program up, or that old story away, what is revealed is that we are one with all of it. You know, there's no separation to anything. And this is why I love astrology, because you get to actually see and experience that, yeah, there's planets out there. Like, look at Pluto, like, that's fucking so far away. Yet the ripple of the vibration of that planet comes down and it moves through the earth. Like, it's a sentient being that speaks to us, and we get affected by it, or we, you know, we feel the impact. So you know, we are one of everything. There's no separation. And I think that would be a really cool new moon prayer, to have that shown to you, or the evidence of that being revealed in this Taurian season of this new moon. Very powerful.
Absolutely. And thinking, like you were saying before, Yvonne, that, you know, and then we'll have the moon hitting Uranus, Uranus being this this radicalization, this liberation, and, like, sometimes absolutely just pure chaos, right? But it feels like, you know, can you have the courage of everything that's happening with Aries? Like, can you bring enough courage to remember yourself belonged and loved? and thinking that then the moon goes boom and it's on Uranus, and then the sun goes boom and it hits Uranus, and at the end of the month, boom, Venus hits Uranus as well. And so it just feels like all these lightning bolts in service to what are you thinking at this time, and how does that impact your capacity to belong? And what's important to think about here in terms of your own natal chart is, where is Taurus in your chart? So the houses will give you a sense of what area of the life this is happening in. And so as Yvonne was saying, Taurus is her 11th house. So this new moon may have an impact amongst friends, community, alliances, you know, the communities and groups that she travels in. For me, Taurus is my 10th house. So how is this going to impact my purpose or my career or my role in the world? You may have Taurus in your 4th house. How is this going to impact family, or particularly your sense of roots? The 4th house is the deep roots of the chart. Like, so if you have a Taurus 4th house, which you'd be an Aquarius rising. So Aquarius rising folk, this is a potent prayer potential for your roots here. Like, dig your toes into that one, friends. Have a look at what house this is in for you, and weave that into your intentions and your sense of what this means as well.
Yeah, that's actually really, really powerful when you can connect your natal chart and direct your prayers, your dark moon prayers and your new moon prayers and your full moon prayers, which we'll speak at the next full moon, is directing it into the house or the area of your life that's falling in. So in this chart here, we've got a Leo rising. For those who are Leo rising, it's happening in your 10th house. Yeah, that's right. You are a Leo rising. And here we are, a Leo rising chart. You know, so directing this into, you know, your sense of purpose of what you're here to do in the world, and, you know, your career of, you know, this way of putting out there and to be seen in what you do is very, very powerful. So I love it that's what's falling on this land is you in Leo rising. I fucking love it.
It's a really, really special moment. And look, I think too, like, to bring this into a more mundane, worldly perspective, like, God's fucking know that what the world needs now is for every citizen to remember themselves belonged. Like, I just want to say that so loud. Like, that is the healing balm that all humans need at this moment, is to remember themselves belonged. And so if you are a moon gazer, praying, which, like Yvonne and I are, consider throwing some of your witchy weight behind that worldly prayer that everyone knows themselves loved and belonged and deeply rooted to this earth. And weaving in those prayers that all beings are safe, that all beings are well, but really feeling like that Mercury Chiron. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Chiron journey later today, but like, how can we dismantle the stories in our intellect, or the things that we have been led to believe, to lean into the felt sense of belonging? And seriously, gods know that what we all need now is to remember ourselves loved and belonged, and connected to this sentient cosmos. That is such a powerful, potent prayer that if a good handful of us all throw some weight behind, oh my goodness, there's like 30 cockies which have all just swept up past the house.
Elimination of community.
We, you know, coordinate, which is like, if we can coordinate ourselves. And okay, so it doesn't, 1:21 p.m. on the 8th of May. But yeah, like, on that day, throw some of your love behind that prayer, and that's part of that win for the collective. It's really, really important.
Really important. And then with that Venus, like in Taurus, you know, of the earth, we're fixed here on the earth. We are of the earth. We are blood and bone, you know, in our bodies. That is an earthly element or material that we are actually of. You know, our souls may come from the cosmos or wherever we come from, right? But our very vessels are of the earth, and we are a fixed feature here for this moment, you know. So this Taurus, Oh God, I fucking love it. It's great.
Oh my
So
goodness.
good.
And if you find yourself in the unfortunately compromised position that I am, where your 3-year-old listens to nothing but the Wish soundtrack, then you will know that we too are all made of stars. Ooh, the amount of times I've heard these songs, my friends, that we're all made of stars. We're all connected by the same minerals and the same electrical impulses. And just to bring it back to this beautiful Six of Pentacles moment, it is the energy of loving exchange, of giving when we have enough to give, of receiving when we are open enough to do so. Like, again, like that, what the world needs now thing is to remember that we are all within this constant flux of exchange. And that middle decan of Taurus is truly one of the most fertile, beautiful moments. And so typically we would be looking at this, and it would fit from the Northern Hemisphere perspective that when the sun is in Taurus, spring is being experienced. And for us, that's not the case. But as we'll see with our full moon in Sagittarius, that is where we start really leaning into that Southern Hemisphere Samhain energy. But we can still connect to our hopes for what we are growing and our hopes for what can we let go of to lean into this more deeply over time, remembering that that new moon is the seed planting, not the experiencing of that there's a full 6 months before that comes into full fruition with the full moon in Taurus 6 months from now. So what do you want to lean into to reap next spring, relating to being in right relationship with the world and with all of the beings in it, not just other human beings, but all of the beings, whether that's the animals, the bugs, the trees, the ancestors, spirits, guides, we're all within that same, we're all connected through the realms.
Beautiful. Okay. So I've just got to plug out my camera and put a new chart. Sorry about that. I had a feeling that that might happen. Okay, now I'm on a different camera. Great. Okay, the one that the kids broke. Woo. Okay, moving on. We're talking about children, children of the earth in this Taurus new moon energy. So moving along, what we wanted to speak to next is what we call the Uranus Cazimi. Cazimi means when the sun is conjunct a planet. So instead of saying sun conjunct Uranus, in this case, we just call it a Cazimi. So it's a Uranus Cazimi that's happening in Taurus. So now that we have a look down here, which is in this chart, the 6th house, happening on the 13th of May. So a few days later at 7:09 p.m. Melbourne time. And we have this sun here, and I'll get out my trusty pen. The sun here marked by a circle and a dot, that's the sun. And you can see here that this is Uranus. It looks like, you know, satellites, which is a very Uranus description of, you know, distant, futuristic, out there, but it's like, where is it going? We don't quite know, which is the chaotic part of Uranus, which brings in change, like sudden changes, electricity. It's like, choom, here happening at 23 degrees and 6 minutes of Taurus. And this is just after the new moon. So we can see that the moon has moved on now into Cancer, and it's almost on the way to a first quarter moon. So it's wow. I'm just, what is this about, this Uranus? So this comes after the back of the Jupiter Uranus conjunction, which, you know, was on everybody's lips back in mid-April. And now Jupiter has moved on and moving into the last degrees of Taurus. But now the sun has caught up and now having a conversation with Uranus. So this is like after the Jupiter conjunction with Uranus, this sun is the first planet to meet Uranus, which will follow by, you know, Venus and Mercury and Mars that will follow up in the next few weeks as well. So this feels like a potent time, I think, to see what was that Jupiter and Uranus all about? And maybe it's like the sun shining on this point of just going, and I don't think we can even see it because the sun's so bright. You know what I mean? Like it just feels like this warmth that's been blown onto whatever happened back in early mid-April.
Absolutely. And the term Cazimi is a Greek term which translates to in the heart of.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about that conjunction being a Cazimi, the idea is that, and we can see this with planets like Mercury and Venus, is that when the sun is having a conjunction with those planets, the planet moves across the face of the sun and until it perfectly reaches the center of the sun. And that's that in the heart. That's where that term Cazimi comes from. And so with the outer planets, it's not quite as pronounced. It's still really important. But there is this idea that because the sun is the glue of our solar system, without the sun, there are no other planets. Whenever there is a conjunction with the sun, it is a case of the sun shining the light on the planet and having an effect on that planet more so than the other way around. And so when we think that Uranus spends, 8 years per sign? So this is coming up to Uranus's 7th year in Taurus. So this would have to be the 6th or 7th time that the sun has met Uranus in Taurus. So what does it mean to be shining the light brightly in this place of fixed earth where we have ideas of what's permanent, what's not, what's trusted and stable, what's not, and Uranus will shake up that sense of stability. What does it mean when the sun comes to shine its full light on that revolutionary, wild, changeable, disruptive energy, particularly given what we've already said and of some of the other things going on? What does it mean to then really highlight that Uranian prerogative, which is to shake things up? And I think that whatever you experience with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, I think the 21st of April or thereabouts, is I wonder if there is an extra chapter to the story when the sun comes through Uranus here potentially as well.
Yeah, and given that it's almost on a first quarter moon too, it's whatever happened back at the Taurus new moon a week and a bit ago. It's like this is the first opportunity that we get to see whatever was coming from that. It's the first seedlings that are coming. You can see this is like again the sextile energy, Becky.
There's sextiles everywhere this month.
60 degrees of sextile. It's like new beginnings or new sprouts that we're starting to see. But are you liking what you're seeing, and do you need to do some early weeding? One of the things, again, what Jane Hardwick Collins would always say is like whatever shows up stands in the way of you and your prayer. And so if you're seeing things that you are not liking, you need to attend to your garden and pull out some weeds so the good stuff can come through, and not be, especially after that Mercury and Chiron conjunction, just before that new moon, what came up from that you were like, oh, getting rubbed up against, or it feels a bit tricky to go, oh, this is just what stands in the way. So I just need to attend to that, because on the other side is the prayer that I've been wishing for. But, but it need this attending and Uranus being changed, things are changing. Things are being changing. Oh my goodness, are we all feeling it? That's for sure, since the eclipses. But this is an exacerbation again, because Uranus is highlighted here. Change is not always easy, especially in Taurus. Taurus likes things to stay the same. It's really comfortable, and all of a sudden it's been ripped out of its comfort zone, and that's not easy. And I feel that with Venus there, it's calling for us to be gentle to ourselves and, to come back to the beauty of things, even if it feels disjolting or, really unsettling, because the nature of Uranus is change, and it's not always a comfortable thing, but to trust it, I think, especially with the sun there, with Uranus in the heart of the sun, that feels so friggin' beautiful, the heart of the sun. Like, but just be wary, it might be hot, but that's okay, because there's a warmth coming from that. And I'm just thinking of that fixicity of Taurus, the warmth that if we keep working things, yeah, no, I was thinking of Leo, fixed fire, but I'm just, if you're working soil and like actually underneath the soil, it's not cold, is it? I can't remember. I think there's a
Or
warmth
even just the core of the earth
at the
is
core
hot
of
as
the earth.
fuck, right?
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. So at some point there's warmth there, but yeah, you just got to get used to the landscape changing, which can be tricky in Taurus, I think.
Totally. And look, if, like me, you have something prominent in Taurus, such as a sun, moon, or rising, Uranus has been all up in that shit for 6 to 7 years. And so this could be a moment of you getting to practice your adaptability and flexibility, which are not Taurus keywords. The opposite of those are the Taurus keywords, which is the steadfastness and the stubbornness and the stability and the accountability, and like the one step at a time, and it's always going to be the same. And Uranus shakes up our idea of that, and our we just start getting comfortable in Taurus, and Uranus goes ha ha, and shakes up that fizzy bottle of kombucha all over again. And so I think too, like thinking about this sextile with the moon, so many sextiles this month, is like it's the weeds, but it's also like, is there a surprise that can delight us in this moment? Like,
Mm.
is the weed a dandelion, which has edible leaves and a root that I can dry and put in a tea? Like, has something popped up here that we maybe didn't speak to in the prayers, but could actually facilitate us along the way that we weren't expecting, and that is that Uranian energy of just prepare for the unexpected, nothing more, nothing less, because you can never fully guess exactly how something Uranian will unfold. But can we be open to the flags of the invasive weeds that may just run amok and take over the whole area where our other planted prayers are? Or has something really interesting popped up that is also worthy of your attention?
Yeah, which is really, really interesting. And just hearing you say that, I'm just seeing this Jupiter here in Taurus getting ever so closer to this trine. So 160 degrees to Pluto here, which is that, is that those deep underworld stuff, yeah, it may look like weeds initially, but it has healing medicine to that as well. And just looking at this Venus here at 17 degrees of Taurus, another sextile with Saturn here. It's calling us, maybe Saturn's connected to discipline, but I feel in Pisces is unbounded energy. It's the mist, it's the haze, but it's also unbounded energy, it's expansion. But Saturn, I think, here is calling for us and calling for Venus to bring discipline to a dreaming and to stay focused on what the good and the beauty is here, calling us and what she's seeing, but to just keep being really disciplined about that focus of beauty and the unboundedness of that could potentially shift timelines, Saturn being the lord of time. But what is time in Pisces? Like, it's unbounded space. Like, what even is that? So this opportunity, if Venus is in discipline in keeping her focus on the beauty that's coming from the changes that Uranus is bringing, it can be this potential that's brewing here, this sextile, this 60-degree angle is like, I can see that, but it's calling for us to keep looking for the good stuff, keep looking for the beauty, keep looking for the love that is here on Earth in Taurus, that's coming from the changes, and not get bogged down by, oh, that's a weed, but not actually investigating what medicine the weed brings.
Absolutely. And remembering too, at this point, we were talking about the new moon being ruled by Venus, and that Venus has this power there, which in Taurus, which she does, but Venus is also preparing for her own Cazimi. So at the moment, Venus is combust, and combustion refers to being within 10 degrees of the sun. So whenever a planet enters within 10 degrees of the sun, it begins its process of combustion. And if you can imagine just getting closer and closer and closer to that heart of the sun, that things start to burn away and detoxify and purify. Cazimi is a very transmuting, rebirthing energy. And so we're having that at the moment in this chart on the 13th of May with the Uranus Cazimi. But at this point, Venus is starting to burn away, and like she's entering the sweat lodge here, preparing for her Cazimi at the end of the month. And so in terms of Venus ruling this conjunction, this Sun-Uranus conjunction, Venus doesn't have quite as much power to hold herself while that is happening. So there's this doubling up of the unexpected. Like, how is this going to move forward given Venus is distracted by how hot the room is right now? You know, so remembering too that there's that Venusian preparation for change and rebirth happening while we're also in this moment experiencing that Uranian radical change.
And it's really interesting that Venus doesn't catch up with the sun here in Taurus. It's only when it goes into Gemini does it. So again, you know, coming back to that Saturn that's calling for discipline, even though things are not stable, and you know, it might be difficult for Venus to find the beauty here, that he's really calling for her to do so. But you know, that's something about discipline that's going to be required to do that when it feels, you know, unsturdy, or you can't see, or everything's heating on Earth. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Ready to do our next one?
Sure. Do you want to start talking about it while I bring it up?
Yes. So on the 16th of May at 3:06 a.m., we have Mercury ingressing into Taurus. This is a really important ingress for Mercury because they've recently completed their retrograde in Aries. And so what happens with the retrograde is that the planet moves and then slows and stops, then starts moving backwards for a time and slows down and stops, and then carries on its merry way. And Mercury does this 3 times a year. And so that all happened in the sign of Aries. So where Mercury usually only spends about 3 weeks per sign, or less even, depending on how fast it's going, Mercury would have spent like 6 weeks or more, like double the amount of time in Aries. And so when Mercury moves into Taurus, there's a real sense of shifting that the energy, because usually Mercury is moving so much more quickly through the signs.
And so this Mercury, so you have a look down here on this chart. This is Taurus. So Mercury joins the Taurus party. So you can see here 0 degrees and 0 minutes on 16th of May 2024 in Melbourne time, which is 3:06 a.m. in the morning. So Mercury has got to do with, you know, communication and the human consciousness and language and thought processes, but it's also speed and how things move fast as well. So it's really interesting with Mercury going into Taurus. It's really going to have to slow down and have a bit of a think, even though it is moving quite fast through Taurus. It's like this fixed earth element it's calling for Mercury to take time in what it is calling in after its retrograde, even though Mercury probably just wants to get going, and it really does move through Taurus really quickly, because by the end of the month, it's already in Gemini. So yeah, this is an interesting transit for Mercury off the bat, you know, after it's been in that retrograde phase in Aries and spent so long in Aries. It just really feels like it changes the energy quite dramatically now, with all these planets more and more so into Taurus and moving away from that Aries energy, even though we've still got Mars, which is quite dominant in Aries, and the North Node and Chiron, which is calling. And also this chart particular, it's got the rising also in Aries as well, which is really interesting.
And I think that even if we just consider that for months now, there's just been this cohort of all of the personal planets moving together, bar the moon, who moves a little bit more quickly, but the sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars have all been bunched pretty much from like Capricorn, Aquarius, of where the sun was moving through Capricorn and Aquarius onward. And Mars has been in proximity, but really following behind. And so Mars has really had the final say as this big cohort of planets makes its way sign by sign. And so with each planet that comes out of Aries, we're really feeling like another ending or another resolution for Aries season, but particularly because it was such a mammoth Aries season with that total solar eclipse that happened there in the middle of April. So with every planet that says see you later to Aries, there's another closing of the door to everything that unfolded through that lunation.
Yeah. And you know, when Mercury moves into Taurus, it's, you know, it almost comes up again in this square to Pluto again, this Pluto energy filtering through. But this square it's a 90-degree angle. It's tension. But it's like, oh, calling for action, but it's not comfortable. And there's a couple of squares here too, because we've got the moon here at its, just past its first quarter phase of this new cycle, squaring Jupiter. Like Jupiter's wanting to expand, but the moon is here. Oh, the dog's the moon, Jupiter wants to expand into its new thing that it's just been changed through. But the moon, this emotional body, in Leo, there's something here that's calling, there's tension here.
Yeah, and I think that we've done an awful lot of talking about Pluto while not talking about Pluto. You know what I mean? Like we're not talking about Pluto forming a conjunction or an aspect itself, but I think it's really important to mention at this point that with Pluto being at 2 degrees of Aquarius, it means that anytime a planet is ingressing into most of the signs, there's a 90% chance that the first conversations with old mate Pluto. And so if a planet is moving into Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, or Aquarius, is that all of them? It's almost all of them, right? Whenever a planet is ingressing into one of those signs from now until early 2026, arguably the first conversation is going to be with Pluto. And that really feels like, this is practice. Get honest with Pluto, or be prepared for the skeletons to just fall out of the closet of their own behest. It behooves us all at this point that, as the planets move into these new signs of like, oh, okay, and this is the shadow coming along for the journey this time. And this is the part of myself I've been avoiding. I need to be honest about this time. And it's I love, it's such a Plutonian thing that Pluto's part of the conversation, but not like, it's kind of like we're talking about Pluto, but it seems in this background way, and yet it features everywhere. And that's partly because simply that all of the planets are bunched hitting those same sensitive degrees. So for instance, if you have a prominent planet in the early degrees of Taurus, there'll be a conversation happening with Pluto and that planet right now. And every time a planet ingresses into Taurus, it's going to ping that Plutonian transit in Aquarius again. And so when those slow outer planets are really loitering at a particular degree, it will light up other sensitive degrees as well. And that, like 29 to 2 degrees or to even 3 degrees is going to be a really sensitive area for most of the signs during an ingress.
Yeah, it just really reminds me of the things that have been stirred up by this Uranus and all these planets having conversations with Uranus is like change isn't an easy thing to do, especially in Taurus. And again, it's like that reviewing of what needs to be changed in the underworld, or needing to go back and look at our shadow selves to keep moving forward, remembering whatever we're calling in, what shows up stands in the way of us and our prayer. So again, this is really highlighted here with this tension of like, yeah, change is not easy. I know it's the thing that I'm calling in as a really good thing, but you know, there's things to attend to do that, you know, whether it's the shadow aspects of ourselves, our healing our inner child, doing some ancestral healing work, given this time of year, deep in autumn, you know, this call to attend those skeletons in this closet before the new thing can come in, because we've got to let the old die and we've got to let that go before we can rebirth something new, but we don't want to take that into the new cycle.
Absolutely. And, you know, the fact that this is a square between Mercury and Pluto and not a sextile and not a trine, that square is what's called a hard aspect. And it's because it creates tension. A square represents, it's that 90-degree angle, and it represents a pivot point where when we go around a circle, and that 90 degrees is where we start to shift around and change direction, moving towards that central point. And so whenever there is a square aspect happening, there's this tug of war or this push-pull happening between the two planets. And Pluto goes, hey, do things my way. And Mercury goes, no, I'm going this way. I'm going to do things my way. And then whatever else unfolds as a result of that tension is what that aspect is talking about. And so with the sextiles and trines we've been talking about with Pluto, what we may be getting there is gentle reminders. What we get here is louder and perhaps harsher, a harsher reality of what we need, of that deeper work that we need to be doing if we really want to enact and enforce the change that all these incredible transits through Aries and through the last 6 weeks or so have been inspiring us to meet.
Yeah, so I got the dogs barking in the background. It's really annoying, very distracting. I know it's not coming through, but it's just like, ah. Okay, so yes, and this is really interesting because now from here on in, we start to do a run up to the full moon. Like this moon is starting to grow, and you know, when it comes up, and we'll talk about this next, is there's an energy of growth here. So if there's tension here, it's coming back to those weeds again. You know, have we attended the garden enough that the weeds have been removed, or you know, or can we be bothered doing that? And that's the tension. Like that's the thing. Yeah, not comfortable. It doesn't feel overly comfortable. This that's why the dogs are barking. It's hilarious.
It's the tension, right? It's showing all the tension. Yeah. And it's the thing too of like, do I have to go and sort you guys out, or can I stay here and try and do my thing the way I intended to do in Taurus with my intellect over here?
The embodiment of this process. They're still going. It's hilarious. You got to trust this process, but it's like the thing is, and I think Becky and I spoke about this before starting this, that we are so embodied in the stars because we dedicate a lot of our life to watching this. Well, you know, there's so much dedication that goes into this work of astrology that we find that it really speaks to us and through us, and we'll be in a theme. It's like, oh, that's that, you know, alignment that we were talking about, and here it is showing up in real life and the embodiment of it. And this is the beauty of what we do, that here we are talking about squares and tensions here, and you know, this stuff that we're not wanting to happen, but it's happening anyway. So how are we going to navigate that, even if it's uncomfortable and hard? That it's just like, fuck, this is really annoying.
Totally.
Yeah.
It makes me think there's an episode of the Astrology podcast that Chris is doing with oh my goodness, I can't think of his name, Levine.
Rick
and
Levine.
Yes, Rick Levine, and it's the Uranus episode, and I think that they got about half an hour or an hour through, and the electricity cut out, and it couldn't be more Uranian, of like this totally unexpected, nope, everything shuts down and turns off. I think they had to start from scratch, and like that's just another example of like, well, they were calling in Uranus, and Uranus showed up. Like, you know, we're talking about this hard aspect, the things going on in the background that we don't feel like addressing because we've got shit to do in the present, and here it is showing up.
Here it is showing up anyway.
I love
so
that.
Hilarious. It just goes to show again, you know, things are happening that, you know, the astrology is speaking to us and through us, but are we paying attention to really see the embodiment of it? I think that's Yeah, it's really cool because we are so attuned to reading it and to, this is what we do, that we are witnessing it in as it happens. But if we weren't, it would be happening anyway. We just wouldn't have been attuned to it.
Absolutely. And that was such a Mercury and Taurus thing to say.
Yeah.
Like when we think of Mercury in terms of communication and language, there's so many different ways to communicate. It's not just through the written word or through verbalizing things, and just thinking of how that Mercury and Taurus communication is the body language and how it makes us feel and what that does to our senses and our input. That's such a beautiful way of thinking about that placement in such a real-time IRL kind of way.
They've stopped now, so we can move on. Okay, so the next chart. So now we're starting to run up to the full moon. This is the Venus and Uranus conjunction. So this is, as we can see here, this is happening a couple of days after Mercury's ingress into Taurus. So the 18th of May, 2024 at 9:22 p.m. in Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we have it here, this Venus here, symbolized by the circle at the top and the cross of matter down below. With Uranus at 23 degrees and 23, 23. There's some numerology going on there. Any was it numerology? Oh, you do numerology, don't you?
No, not so much. I think we need to get Tash in on a session for that.
Tash, if you're listening, shout out to you, Tash Colchester. So they're meeting at 20 degrees and 23. Sorry, I'm going to start this again. 23 degrees and 23 minutes. 23. There's something in that feels potent. And this here, and you can see here the sun now coming into conjunction with Jupiter, but also the moon is now moving. It's in this, we're starting to see it. It's moving so close to its fullness, which will be in Sagittarius. But there's a real growing moon now. It's like this, it's a trine, this moving into a harmonious aspect after the awkwardness that happened, a few days earlier.
Yeah, and I think that there's been already so much happening and being unearthed in Taurus. So, and because that is Venus's domicile, it's her home, it's where she's really comfortable, that we've probably had a pretty good lead up to how this narrative may unfold at this point. And so if Venus is relationships and being relational, if it's intimacy, if it is pleasure and harmony and love and receptivity, and then we have Uranus, which is liberation, radicalization, unexpected change or disruption, for better or worse. How does our sense of what maybe something that we thought couldn't be changed in those Venusian spheres, where does that get challenged or disrupted? And how can we meet that with grounded curiosity in that Taurus form, to be willing to see what Uranus lights up at that time with Venus?
Absolutely. And I'm just looking at this trines that ever since February, actually, we haven't seen many trines because of all the planets have sort of been bunched up all together down in Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. This feels like the beginning, actually. It feels like the beginning of Gemini season, just looking at this, even though nothing's in Gemini at the moment, but there is a forming trine, a grand trine here with the moon between the air signs. So, 28 degrees, the sun is here. It's so close to Gemini, and so is Jupiter. That it feels like with the moon there in Libra and Pluto, back to Pluto. Isn't that interesting? Pluto in fixed air in Aquarius, that there's a new energy or new element coming into play that we haven't really seen for a while. And in this harmonious aspect that things are starting to open up a little bit. And yeah, I just feel that this Venus coming into this conjunction with Uranus, it's just like, now what do we change in the spheres of Venus and the beauty, what prayers that we sung up back at this Taurian new moon like a couple of weeks ago, changes now happening from that. The wishes that we sent out back there is, here's the time for it to shift and change, but it feels more harmonious or beautiful. And maybe that's because it's the Venus realm, but this trines, trines are 160 degrees. It's a real flowing aspect that feels so easeful. And, we can just move and glide through this really beautifully, even though it is change.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting to note too that, through March, there was a real emphasis in Pisces. And so therefore, people with prominent mutable signs being filled with planets. So if you've got planets or a rising sign in the other mutable signs of Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius, then whatever was happening in Pisces in March was forming hard aspects to those other signs, and so then we had all of the chaos happening in Aries. So then the cardinal folk, so people with strong placements in Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, they all had their shit pinged and poked and egged on to transform or die. And now we have it all happening in Taurus. So now all of the fixed sign folk, so people with prominent planets or placements in Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, now it is our turn, my friends, to really be bearing the brunt of these, maybe not requests, more so demands, to be flexible and to shift and to be open to change. And that's not something that comes supernaturally to fixed sign folk. And so this could be, while revolutionary and beautiful, it could also feel really uncomfortable, especially because it's already been a very big couple of months, astrologically speaking.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways you can determine, is this going to ping my chart, is just getting to know your own chart in the sense of, am I strongly cardinal? Like, are the cardinal signs really important for my chart? Is it the fixed signs that are really populated and important, or is it the mutable ones? And when we see the planets bunched up like this, we can be sure that something is getting lit up or activated or pinged just by virtue of there being 500,000 planets moving through that space.
Yeah. So I had to laugh when you said back in March all the mutable signs had their thing. I have like majority of my planets in mutable signs, and March was a doozy. So yeah, I can hold testament to the pinging off of your planets wherever they land at this time. It can be pretty rough. So, just sending love to all the fixed signs at this time. But yes, for a mutable sign here, that it feels nice. It feels good to be on the other end of that. And don't worry, fixed signs, you will get through this. It will be okay. But you had a rough trot, all the fixed signs, with this Uranus sitting here for quite some time. Like, there's been stuff being stirred up. So, this is not new.
No, and that's kind of, I think, a really important thing to lean into. And I think we sort of touched on that with the Sun Uranus. Is like, Uranus has been here 6-7 years already. What have Taurians, or what have our fixed sign folk, how have we learned to adapt to that? How have we learned to implement nourishment, going slow, and self-care so that we can hold ourselves when the planets come through Taurus and they don't get their typical trot? They get, the lightning bolt thrown in the mix, or the random hailstorm that comes on a summer day, or, or the power going out just before a party starts. Like, we've been running with that for a little while now. And so how have we learned to mitigate that? And again, like that's where astrology is such a powerful tool, is that we can look at this from this point here on the 25th of April and go, okay, 18th of May, if Venus is important for you, if Taurus is important for you, if the fixed signs are meaningful in your chart, then this could be a moment to buckle in, and all the better for it.
Absolutely, because it is this trine energy. There is this opening up energy. So, you know, that feels very supportive, even if it feels rough. You know, there is
Yes.
some elements here that are really supportive to help open up to the changes that are happening. And, you know, Venus, God, Venus and Taurus is so beautiful. I just love it. But, you know, she's been changed and worked over. And what does that mean for you when, you know, the earth, the beauty of the earth is changing? And right next to the sun and Jupiter here, like this Jupiter the next day, as the Jupiter Cazimi, so the sun, you know, in the heart, Jupiter in the heart of the sun the following day within this time frame. And gosh, it feels like this expansion of the heart. And maybe that's the change of Venus and Uranus, is that we get a new lens to see even more beauty that is here, given its the harmonious aspects. But, you know, yeah, that it just feels really, really interesting. And also, you know, not long after that, this Mars in North Node is calling us to take action through the, you know, stepping through this portal of something for the future. Yeah, this actually, I think, coming from a mutable sign perspective, this feels really lovely into the lead up to the full moon.
You're absolutely right. And I think that, yeah, if we can conceptualize Uranus and Venus, as in your words, I believe, as that radical love, like, can we shift through the discomfort of change to really open ourselves up to radical love? Given all of the other big poignant configurations that are happening, like you said, the Jupiter Cazimi, Mars conjunct the North Node, we've got this epic fucking full moon coming up 2 days later, and then a whole bunch of other amazing shits going down. Like, this feels like the test of kind of being rattled, like, are you going to open to radical love or aren't you? And I think that, you know, if you, the more that you can surrender to that, the less it's being shook to do so. You know, maybe it's a tap on the shoulder instead of the full body shake, like, will you open up? So yeah, it kind of, and we've been, you know, preparing for this too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just have to laugh because in the lead up to this full moon, like not long after this chart, you know, within the next 24 hours, this moon moves over the south node. It's like, well, are you going to stay stuck in the past, or are you coming along with this revolutionary love? Like, it's your choice. You can
Absolutely.
go back through the portal of backwards if you want to, but it's not going to be really comfortable, you know, and that's the fixed sign that really wants to stay where it is. And that, I think that's where the tension's coming from. But, you know, everything is pushing you towards stepping through this North Node portal with Mars and to expand into this something new of this revolutionary love that this Venus and Uranus conjunct with, you know, the Jupiter Cazimi. Like, wow, there's a lot going on into the lead up to this full moon. And it feels like as the moon is growing over the next couple of days in the lead up to this full moon is, you know, this dreaming big, this, you know, can we stretch into this, you know, into this Sagittarius full moon, which will, what it will be. You know, Sagittarius is all about the stars and, you know, just really shooting your arrow of the archer out to the cosmos for this expansion. You know, that's the key word, ruled by Jupiter. I expand. And here is Jupiter here in the heart of the sun, expanding the heart. You know, it's just it could be tricky if you're not ready for that. But if you are, like, you're going to go to some amazing places here if you want to, you know, if you allow yourself to do this. And this lead into this full moon as well, you've got this Jupiter Cazimi. Here's the sextiles again, Becky's favorite sextiles. There's a dreaming here. You know, this Neptune is at the last degrees of Pisces, last degrees of the whole friggin' zodiac, in this unbounded, expansive, but the dreaming scape, you know, you can choose if you wish to think it's an illusion, or you can actually switch it to go, well, is it a dreaming instead? And to expand into the dreaming, not get caught into the shadow of what Neptune can be, is sort of, oh, I'm addicted to the past, or I'm being caught into that what could be illusion, or this is not real, or whatever. To actually turn your focus again, that what that Venus and Uranus is calling us to do is step into radical revolutionary love and expanding into that of the beauty of the earth, and move forward and action it and be the leader of it in Aries, you know, Mars and Aries and North Node. Move forward. But, you know, your choice. You don't have to do any of that, but it's not going to be comfortable.
Totally. Yeah, transform or die, right?
Yeah, pretty much. That's what it feels like.
And what I love about this too is like remembering that this chart on the screen that we're looking at is a static moment, but that only an hour before this, the moon would have been at the 29th degree of Virgo, in that perfect opposition to Neptune across the other side of the zodiac at the 29th degree of Pisces. And so again, like the moon materializing the things that it is in conversation with through aspects, not just through conjunctions, but through all of the dialogue that it's in, that the moon is really importing that dreamscape and creating a tension of, is this real? Isn't it real? Like particularly at that last degree of Virgo, who like just give me the plan, right? Virgo is just give me the to-do list, just give me the set of instructions. I want quantitative over qualitative, and dreamy Neptune just wants to like dissolve the paper of your to-do list into its original parts, you know? And so there can be, you know, that tension through that moon Neptune aspect happening. But because there is that trine from the moon down to that Jupiter Sun Cazimi, it's all part of that story, that the tension and the potential for growth and expansion is all a part of that same story. And the moon is really bringing that into the real and making it real. And we have to remember that the moon is also our sense of safety. Wherever the moon is in our natal chart can tell us about what helps us feel safe, what helps us feel at ease and comfortable, and like we are in terrain that we can navigate with ease. And so when the moon has these tense aspects, that sense of safety can be challenged. But also, as we can see, like over this next 48 hours, the moon is going to move over the South Node, which absolutely is that portal to the past, but is also very stripping. It's a void. It wants to dematerialize. And like those are keywords that we're using for Neptune as well. So like this 24-hour period, and like, you know, a Cazimi is the dematerializing of the planet that is in the heart of the sun. It is a total defrag and refresh for the planet that is in the heart. And so again, this is where astrology just becomes so potent and powerful, is when we can see the same words coming up through totally different aspects or configurations. And it means that the story becomes more prominent. And so really being able to lean into the things that are uncomfortable, you know, to a point and within reason, to see what we come out with on the other side of that. Like, what radical revolutionary love do we find when we realize that what we thought was keeping us safe was actually a hindrance, or was actually keeping us from connecting with something more deeply? And given the full moon that we're in for a few days from here, this feels like a really important setup to reap the benefits of the full moon.
Absolutely. So let's look at the full moon now. Do you want to start talking about the full moon?
Yes, please. And so maybe just for the sake of the listener, so the Jupiter Sun Cazimi is exact on the 19th of May at 4:35 a.m. And the Mars North Node conjunction is exact in Aries on the 20th of May at 1:40 p.m. Just some of those other things that we were looking at with that chart, and we'll skip over them to the 23rd of May, which is our full moon for the month in Sagittarius.
Yes. So the lead up into this full moon is really big, but there's a lot happening between the 20th and the 23rd, as Becky was just saying. let me see. So what we have here is a Sagittarius full moon here at on the 23rd of May 2024 in Melbourne. It is at 11:42. That's also in Sydney and Brisbane, Australian Eastern Standard Time. I've got to remember to keep saying that. At 11:42 p.m., very close to midnight in the evening. But this, what we have here, so here it is at 2 degrees of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. So this is a Jupiter ruled moon after the sun has had a conversation with Jupiter. And look, both Jupiter and the sun are right at the last degrees of Taurus. Now, this is huge because Jupiter, Jupiter, sorry, the sun has moved into Gemini already. So, but the Jupiter and Venus at 29 degrees, and this is so powerful because especially for Jupiter has been in Taurus for over a year now and has been plodding along, expanding, moving, changing with this Uranus as well. And now it's having these final words of Taurus right at this Jupiter full moon at 2 degrees and 55 minutes of Sagittarius, who is the archer, is the expansion. It is the, taking what we've learned from this deep transformation and shooting out and dreaming something else. Yeah.
Absolutely. And because the moon gives us a very embodied way of experiencing the sky, this is really a precious moment to connect with Jupiter and what it has meant for Jupiter to have been moving through Taurus for a year. So if you feel inclined, the invitation here is to reflect on the last 12 months that have been and to lean in with your moon prayers around ending well with Jupiter at this point. Like, what last things are being illuminated by this beautiful, mutable, fiery Jupiterian moon that are encouraging us to end well in that Taurian sort of way.
I just love it too with this final conversation with Jupiter and Taurus. So Venus is there showing up, having an aspect to, another aspect to another sextile to this Neptune here in Pisces, like this connection between the dreaming and the unbounded energy and the unbounded realms. This Jupiter of expansion in its under its moon, and with Venus there in its home sign, like this is so friggin' beautiful. It's so lovely. I just love this. I love this full moon.
It's really, really special, especially with some of the more fraught lunations that we've had recently. I think that the new moon, with the Venus co-presence in Taurus, that we talked about using the Six of Pentacles as a way into the story of that was that lush, beautiful, fertile soil to be beginning with. And then here we are with the growth that has come from that moment. And yeah, Venus Venus and Jupiter are the two benefic planets. So they're the two planets which are considered, for lack of better words, like most lucky, most supportive, most beautiful, most magnanimous, all those kinds of things. And when those two planets meet up in the sky, it's like not just the best party you've ever been to, but you learned some cool shit while you were there. And like, it was a spiritually expansive moment where you realize just how beautiful the world is and how glad you are to be here. Like it's all of those things. It's the gorgeous relational Venus with then also this deep belonging and meaning that Jupiter brings as well in that lush, fertile space of Taurus. And I think that it bears recognition that at this point, both Venus and Jupiter are only 3 degrees away from the sun, which means that they are both heavily combust at this time. They are not in supercharged, powerful positions as a result of sweating from the heat of the sun in this moment. So if the sun was another 15, 20 degrees away, this would be a hella epic moment in time. And even though it is super beautiful and has a lot of potential, it's important to remember that Venus and Jupiter are still very much sweating it out near the sun there. And so rather than expecting fireworks and all these big, amazing things to happen, what might be a better way of approaching this would be rather than expecting material change, to engage with it in a more reflective way of how do I want this to feel? How do I want this to look? What is the potential of this full moon to grow out and expand out into other moments in time when those Jupiterian and Venusian parts of myself are a little freed up and have a little more time on their hands and are able to really dedicate themselves to something that means a lot to them.
Absolutely. And just hearing you describe that, what it feels like to me, just looking at that, and it feels like, you know, just lying on the earth and just full gratitude and just spread out, looking at the stars and just, you know, dreaming of this beautiful world that, you know, we are cultivating here and that we are on at this point in time. Like it just feels that, especially here on this land with next to the IC, that's the roots. Like you're sitting with the roots, you're sitting on the earth, lying there in the quiet spaces and just really feeling the multidimensional layers of everything that is here in this wonderment and beauty. But it's not the party, but it's the, you know, the sitting with and being with in the inner spaces. And also to mention that the sun is now ingressed in Gemini, which is why it's a Sagittarius full moon. But that here at 2 degrees, it's making a trine aspect. Again, the trines are starting to come in with Pluto, which last it met with that grand entrance of Pluto into Aquarius back, you know, January 25th or around about that time. Like we are now, after all this journeying in this first quarter and over of this sun moving away from Pluto, it's now able to look at Pluto and seeing all the hard work it's been transforming as it's been, you know, in tricky positions with Pluto here as well.
Yeah. And sorry, my daughter just came home.
Oh, isn't it funny?
I'll say hello to her in a minute. Yeah, it's I think spoke to what I was trying to find in my words and couldn't quite find. Like I think that while I love full moon prayers, that sometimes they can become shopping lists of what we want to manifest in our life. And this is a perfect example of like, now is not the time to ask for a favor from Jupiter or Venus, but it is an excellent time to pay our respects and to realign our devotion and to lean into gratitude. And I feel like the nature of that would be like, you know, you'd lean in and you'd think, you know, damn, I'm so grateful for this thing. And Jupiter or Venus would be like, oh, yummy, 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 give me some more. And like, you'll just find yourself on this big gratitude high, and you don't need to ask for anything to experience that. And I think this is a beautiful moment of recognizing Jupiter and Venus, while in this beautiful position, have things to tend to. Like, don't ask them for shit right now. Like, I'm cooking dinner, can I have a hot second please? You know, like it's one of those minutes where you just have to focus on this other thing that you're doing. But you know, if that small person comes up to you while you're cooking dinner just to say, I love you, mummy, oh, I am available for that gratitude. You know, like that is something I can stop and connect with and be like, yes. And you give something back in that attention. Like it's the reciprocity and the confirming of that relationship that we're in through gratitude, rather than hoping that this means something that we can gain from.
Absolutely. And also I've just seen that this moon is making a sextile to Pluto here too. So even more of a call to really just be with and not to call in changes, but to just be thankful for all that you've moved through over the last few months. Like, it has been an enormous 3 months to get to this point. And here on this land, we're moving into winter solstice. You know, this is a time for reflection and honoring of what has been, and just seeing the new shoots that will come up from that, preparing for spring. But at this point, it's like, wow, this has changed and shifted, and that really hurt, and that was a bit ouchy, but wow, I got through it, and here I am under this full, you know, this expansion of this Jupiter led full moon, and really taking that moment to just be with the greatness of our cosmos and our earth and our bodies, and you know, whatever the earthly thing in Taurus has shown you of the beauty that, you know, that's here for us all. And I feel like that, coming back to what you said earlier, is like that belonging, like feel yourself belonged here, but not just of the earth. Like Jupiter here in Sagittarius is pointing out to the cosmos, you know, shooting its arrow out, that you're not just a citizen of the earth, you're actually a citizen of the galactics, you know. And when you take yourself out into that space, you see that you are one in everything. Like, there's no disconnection out there. Like, we are actually one with everything. And this is, I feel that what we spoke about at the beginning of this podcast is now this is a full illumination of that. How fun is that?
Yeah, it's such a big, beautiful moment. And the fact that there are so many aspects happening, you know, the full moon itself is an opposition between the sun and the moon, but we have, you know, if we just look at the fact that the sun, the moon, and Pluto are all at 2 degrees, like there's a really beautiful, cyclical, ongoing, like looping melody being played through the fact that they are all in dialogue with each other. The sun can see the moon and Pluto, the Pluto, and like vice versa. They all see each other in this moment, with Venus and Jupiter tied into that seeing as well. It really is a moment to lean into that looping melody of the cosmos. And you said that so beautifully. Like, we're not just earthly citizens, we are cosmic citizens of the universe as well. And I think that this is a moment to, by choice or just randomly, that we may find ourselves really noticing that. And I think that if what we experience is the opposite, and perhaps we are feeling an absence of something or feeling a disconnection, what I would invite you to here is to just sink a little deeper into that and see if beneath that suffering, that holding isn't actually waiting for you. Like, sometimes that suffering at feeling alone or disconnected is the first layer of the love that's just hiding beneath. And so there is an opportunity here, not just to lean into that cosmic citizenship that we have if it feels obvious, but also to hold yourself if it doesn't, to give yourself permission to feel what's there. And like you said, Eve on Pluto does that. It just asks us to be present to what is. And to remember that, yeah, beneath that it is still there, even if we don't feel it. And this is something I say to my clients all of the time, is that just because something feels real, and just because we're having a big feeling around something, the feeling is real, it doesn't make the story of that feeling true. So if we're having big feelings around not feeling belonged, or feeling that there are obstacles to feeling connected to this world and this life and this cosmos, that feeling is so real, and we don't undermine that, but it is worth remembering that feelings are feelings. They're not necessarily truly aligned with the story beneath those feelings, and that may be a really potent moment to lean into that if you have been feeling depressed or disconnected or a little bit set aside at this time, that this would be a moment to, if you are able and willing, to gently challenge that and just see what rises to meet you in that.
And what I'm hearing, what you're saying is, this sun in Gemini, it can be quite heady. It is an air sign, and and I'm just thinking of the mutable air sign that things, different stories running through that's
Yeah,
quickly changing, that can get us caught. But also what I'm hearing is forming, and what you're just saying is this Venus and Chiron conjunction that is moving together, just to be aware of getting stuck in your head and getting stuck into the stories that, may not be true at this time. They might have been at some other time, but in this time and moment of this full moon, are they really real or not? Is it mythology, or is this Mars? Be careful of the anger that might come up from the stories that may not be true, that because we're getting stuck in our head. And just to come back to the simplicity of what Taurus with Venus and Jupiter here are calling us to do, looking out in the wider cosmos, is just come back to the earthly body, come back to the simple beauty that is here, and expand that, as opposed to get caught in our heads in the stories that Chiron and Mars might be starting to stir up now.
Absolutely. And I feel too, to just mention, as you've highlighted on the visual here, is that yes, we're looking at these planets at 2 degrees, the sun, the moon, and Pluto, all within these trine and sextile aspects. Like, that's quite potent to have them all, in this looping conversation. But recognizing too that Neptune at 29 degrees is within a 2-degree orb of that. So even though there is a sign barrier, even though it's not quite as potent as those planets at 2 degrees, with Neptune being at 29 degrees of Pisces, it's adding another point of dialogue to this larger conversation, which is even more deeply weaving in Jupiter and Venus also on the 29th degree. So 29 to 2 degrees across that sign barrier is a very, very alive area of the sky in this chart. And Neptune does, it's really pulling in the dreaming and the macro cycles, the bigger cycles that we are connected to. And it's challenging the illusions that we perpetuate in our own lives. Like, gosh, this few months really is just such an incredible, it's so full of potential to break free of stories.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this full moon, it's like, it's such a warm, it feels to me like a hand reaching out from somewhere that you would rather be, and a smile meeting you. It's like, are you going to clasp my hand so I can pull you over here into this space you're dreaming into? Like, do you have the courage to challenge these stories, which is what Mars in Aries is doing with the North Node and Chiron? And these moments where that cosmic love is so abundant and obvious and open to all. Like, can we dissolve what we thought was true or real and challenge that to be more where we would rather be? It's quite phenomenal, actually. Like, there's this larger story at play, and we've hit a 2-hour mark at this
Oh my
point at 4
goodness.
p.m. And there was a whole Chiron story we wanted to talk about, and I'm going to say right now we need a whole other 2 hours to start that. But if that story of challenging wounds and beliefs and challenging what's healing and what's not speaks to you, keep an eye out for a future episode, because we are absolutely going to talk about the incredible potent configurations that have been happening with Chiron, the wounded healer, over this last few months, and how that will unfold into the next few months. So yeah, if you're really feeling the resonance of that, keep an eye out, jump on our Patreon, and make sure that you're following us so that you get notifications of a future Chiron episode coming soon.
Absolutely. There's lots to talk about when it comes to Chiron. Chiron's been really speaking to us, at least since February. It's been massive. But the leading to this full moon is big, with the sun ingressing into Gemini, that Venus and Jupiter conjunction. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot going on the day after, and a couple of days after. This last bit of May it is just feels like one thing after another, after another, after another. It's yeah, and I think we continue to get challenged in terms of that reviewing of that Chiron story, especially in the lead up to that Mars conjunct Chiron. I mean, that's a pretty big aspect. What were we going to next? I'm just looking at here.
Well, I think that we were going to look at the Mars conjunct Chiron on the 30th of May, but I might just quickly shout out some of the aspects that are happening between the full moon and then, and just also feeling to, even though I would love to do this for another hour with you, I feel like our listeners probably need a hot second.
Too.
But on the 24th of May at 6:31 a.m., we have Venus ingressing into Gemini, which is a big moment. So Venus in Gemini is playful, friendly, curious, flirtatious. On that same day, we have Jupiter sextiling Neptune, and remembering that Jupiter and Venus are very close together there. So whatever conversations they are having, the other one is having as well. On the 25th of May at 9:13 p.m., we have Venus in conversation with, drumroll please, Pluto. There will be a trine to Pluto. So as we said, every time a planet ingresses into the majority of the signs, first cap of the rank is to have a conversation with Pluto. And that is what Venus is doing on the 25th. On the 26th of the 5th, we have Jupiter moving into Gemini, which is such a big moment. That's a big cycle that's ending and beginning, as Jupiter would have spent a year in Taurus. As part of our offering with the Sentient Sky for our Patreons, I am offering an elected chart each month. And if that is something that interests you, go and have a look at our Patreon, because there is a special Jupiter moving into Gemini offering there. So if you'd like to learn more and be prompted to leaning into that moment, go and have a look at our Patreon. But yeah, it's a really, really special moment that's worth paying attention to. On the 28th of May at 1:17 p.m., we have Mercury sextile Saturn in Pisces. And then the next big one was the Mars conjunct Chiron, which is happening 30th of May, 2:45 a.m., all AEST. And so, gosh, we need another hour.
Oh, we do. We really, really do. It's just a lot. And I think not every month's going to be like this. It's just a lot going on. And especially, so when we look at this chart of this Mars conjunct Chiron at 22 degrees of Aries, this feels like the grand finale of Aries season. We've been conversing Aries season far out since, early March, when that Mercury first went in there. And from that, as you can see what Becky just spoke about, if you have a look down here in Gemini, we've got all these planets now moving into Gemini, that Jupiter, like that's massive now, like after a whole year moving through Taurus, this brings a whole new energy now. This is different. Things have changed, as we know they were changing, especially throughout April, sort of end of March, April, and early May. This is, I think, when we start to see it. This movement also from Mars away from the sun, we're able to see things a little bit differently now, but this energy is moving into air, like with this sun now, but this is in lead up to the sun, like the Venus Cazimi here too as well. So this is really, really interesting. Mercury will follow close behind. But yeah, this transit of Mars into Chiron, this Mars that's had a conversation since February with Pluto and Saturn and Neptune and the North Node, and like it's been through the ringer, this Mars. It's definitely come up. And now with this conversation with Chiron, and I'm wondering if Mars is going to be able to discern those old, outdated stories for it to actually become the healer that it's been called up from all these conversations with the big outer planets.
Yeah, it's definitely a testing moment, isn't it? Because it feels like this simultaneous question, like we said earlier, of now what? You know, with everything that we know now what? But Mars also signifies conflict and could very well be salt in this, you know, very freshly, newly exposed wound. Like Chiron has been in all of these dialogues with all of the other personal planets. We had that total solar eclipse to the minute conjunct Chiron. Like, so much has been happening there. And I think that there's this real stark decision that happens here with, am I going to choose to boldly move forward in a new way, or am I going to grump and react to the pain that I may feel from this at this time? Like, how can I not ignore my suffering, but be brave enough to hold it and choose love anyway, like, rather than to be reactive or to allow that martial tendency, which can become inflammatory and angry. Like, have we learned yet? You know, have we learned yet to hold that wound differently? And because that's what the Mercury retrograde is encouraging us to do. It's what the eclipse encouraged. Venus brought the balm to help us show that, you know, even in the hardest moments, there is still healing to be found. So much has happened there. And now this really is a test. Like, when salt goes in the wound, how are we going to respond? Are we going to respond by resisting and pushing back and further separating? Because Mars also rules that cutting and that separating. And let's actually go into that further, because separation might be what's needed for that wound at that time. Like, sometimes there is just putrefying flesh, and it just needs to be cut out, and that is the healing way forward. So let's not assume that all severing or cutting is bad, but let's not reach for the knife the moment we feel pain either, and be willing to sit with that long enough to gain the information Mars brings, and make a courageous, solid decision moving forward.
Absolutely. And then just thinking of, you know, the healing, if we sit with that wounding long enough, that we become the healer, we become the teacher of whatever wounding is that for other people. And I think so close to the North Node, it's like, this is what we're being sung up for, but it's not easy to go back. You know, I'm thinking of those skeletons of the closet that we spoke about earlier, you know, to look at actually what is there and the soreness and the pains that are there, and to attend to them with gentleness and tenderness, which is not easy for Mars in Aries. Like, you know, it just wants to get going and sort of just, even if, as you said, the flesh is hanging off, it still wants to move. You know, I wonder if we can remember what happened just before the full moon. Like, can we remember and come back to what happened a week earlier with that Venus conjunct Jupiter and the last degrees of Taurus? You know, can we remember that to bring with, or have we forgotten that already? You know, and also remembering this is a waning moon, this is a coming into a harvest moon. You know, what's the harvest of that? And the things that weren't attended to at the beginning when we spoke about that Taurus new moon almost 3 or 4 weeks, you know, almost 4 weeks ago, you know, whatever was coming up from that, you know, here's the harvest of that. But, you know, what came up could have been that, I'm just thinking of that call to expand into love and beauty, that Venus was there, but also, you know, also comes with the reasons why we can't. And so this is the potential when this can come up here, and that pain of being, oh, I was so close, but this really held me back, or that was really sore and that was really painful, because the very love that was shown to us was so magnificent and beauty that there might be a story here of the wounding that I'm not, you know, I can't live up to that, or there's something there that's sore.
And I think too, like, what a test to feel it and do it anyway.
Yeah.
You know, like that's the point. It's not that there's this big love that, and that you are a cosmic citizen until you have a hurt feeling, and then you start cutting and chopping it all away and bemoaning it and insulting the barista because the coffee wasn't hot enough, you know, like It's not about them, it's about you, my love. And it's that thing of like, can you hold that frustration or that suffering without impulsively burning everything down? And I think that we need to flag that the North Node is only 6 degrees away from this conjunction. And I think that modern astrology, while beautifully illustrating the nodes, also does a little bit of a disservice, because the nodes are tricky. They're very otherworldly. And the North Node, while it is related to purpose and what we're here for, it is also an insatiable hunger.
Mm.
And so right near this Chiron, this asteroid of the wounded healer, and all of the incredible wisdom and medicine it brings, as long as all of the suffering and pain and ouchies that it brings. And then we have Mars. So both Mars and Chiron are turned up to 120% when they are in the presence of the North Node. And so I think that at this time, exercising caution is probably a pretty good tactic, simply because it might feel worse than it is, just because of that co-presence of the North Node. And even those 6 degrees, they are starting to separate and come away from that. It is still prominent. And so I think that, you know, it's that thing of like reading a text message and having a big reaction, being like, that's it, this is the last straw, I'm not doing this anymore, I'm setting a boundary and I'm going to cut them out of my life. And we have, you know, this whole big angry tirade internally. And it's like, just, can you hold yourself in that before hurling the pain at someone else, so that you can discern if that's really what needs to happen? And maybe what really needs to happen is a new boundary setting, but maybe it doesn't have to be flung at them, you know, and or maybe it's even more about something within you than it is somebody else. But I think with the North Node so close there, whatever wound gets poked here is going to have the potential to feel worse and to be exacerbated in an exponential, possibly unexplained way. Like the nodes really bring effects that we can't always explain. And we're like, why am I so cranky about this? Or why does this hurt so much? And like within a couple of days and that separation and that distance starting to form, and again, in an unexplained kind of way, it'll just start to dissipate. And we may or may not ever get to the bottom of why we felt the way that we felt. But that's the part of the Chiron medicine, is, can you have that pain and hold yourself anyway? Like, can you come back to love anyway?
Absolutely. And I think what you just spoke of too is being really careful of your words, and you know, that shooting off that Mars likes to do, just like chum, go, without really thinking, that you've got just down the day after, not even 24 hours later, this Mercury conjuncts Uranus, like words, language, you know, communication suddenly changing. So even more so, even more so, exactly. See, being careful of, you know, where that Mars pain is being shot towards, you know, that discernment that it's calling for us to, you know, to just really take a step back for a moment and take, you know, just have a moment of just sitting by yourself somewhere, you know, and not getting really caught in that flesh coming off. And it's like, yeah, that really hurts, but be careful in what you say, because it has the potential to really change things if something is said that's, you know, aggressive or really hurtful towards somebody else, because of this Mars, Mercury and Uranus conjunction coming up within that time frame as well. Yeah.
That's a really, really important point, is like, how might our pain tempt us to respond verbally or through communication in a way that actually could have a much more unexpected Uranian, far further reaching effect than we imagined.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ways of honing in on this and reflecting on where in my life might this be affecting me is, again, to come back to the houses. So for you, what house is Aries? You know, in this chart, Aries is the first house, and that's the self. You know, that is literally you in this manifest reality. It's your body. And so if you're an Aries rising, this could be something that is quite loud or quite obvious. It could be something that you feel really palpably because it's in the first house. If Aries is your seventh house and you're a Libra rising, this could be witnessing pain in your partner or in a significant other and really having to be like, whoa, and like learning how can I hold them in their pain without responding or flinging something at them? Like, can I hold myself while holding another, if that is happening in the seventh house? Are there any other examples you want to share with that?
No, not at this point. It's just like, oh, it's just getting caught in. I'm just also thinking of, this Mercury's home sign, which is Gemini, this potential also for exacerbation or something going far beyond what you expected, because Jupiter is now in Gemini as well. Like this, there's something of being wary of your words during this time, because of that Jupiter now in Gemini and that Mercury having a conversation with Uranus. Like, yeah, it has the potential to really blow out much further than you expect if we're not careful, and what are we directing our words or language towards.
Yeah, and I think and again, like this is where the language of astrology, when you see it repeating itself, you can go, this is the thing, is that we have Venus so close to being in Cazimi, in the heart of the sun. So that Sun-Venus conjunction in Gemini is a degree and a half away from each other. Venus is the planet of relationships. And so the planet ruling relationships is fucking sweating right now. She has no time to mitigate or be the diplomat of your relational shit. She's busy. And so if Venus was in a better position, then perhaps we could say, oh, it might cause a disruption, but it'll be smoothed over. Venus does not have it in her to smooth things over right now. And so there really is so there's 3 different or 4 different things showing up here saying, watch the way your martial energy, your anger, your frustration, your reaction to pain, watch how that gets directed and tend yourself as needed to be grounded in that process, because Venus doesn't have the time for your shit. Mercury's going to say something that he shouldn't, and the North Node is going to make it seem bigger than it is. And in saying all of that too, though, there is the capacity here, I think, to really expand our repertoire of how do we move through uncomfortable, painful circumstances when we are perhaps not as resourced as we would like to be. Like when all we want to do is point the finger and say, you motherfucker, like, how do we hold ourselves and check in around, is that what needs to be said or not? And sometimes that's actually exactly what needs to be said, and we can bow to that as well. But to just really use our discernment at a time when our discernment might feel off, or like there might not be much clarity, like what do we do then?
Yeah.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. And then what a way to finish off this month of May with that kaboom at the end. And, this call to just be really gentle in the waning of the moon as it comes into a dark phase. And also here in the Southern Hemisphere, the darkness of the Earth season as well as we move into winter. Yep.
Absolutely. And like if you think about the way winter pulls you all into your family unit, it pulls you all indoors, it pulls you into close quarters. Like think about how that martial energy is moving in you with your loved ones, because this is the setup for winter to come. And just weaving in that Southern Hemisphere embodiment is, how do we hold our pain while being in close quarters? And like, can that martial conversation, instead of being get the fuck out of my space, like can that instead just being, I don't have words, I'm struggling, can you give me some space please? And like that might not be the kindest way we'd like to say that, but that is potentially far kinder than something else that could come out if we don't do that. Really, really big
What
way
a
to end May.
kaboom. It feels
Yep.
like, we started off talking about skeletons in the closet, and this is when the skeletons can really, if we're not attending to them throughout this cycle, can really come and bite us on the ass and really bring some upheaval moving into that winter solstice period. Like,
It is
how
definitely an
incredible.
exploding skeleton.
Yeah. And coming back to our key words, rebirth, what now, and dream big. And I think to attend the ultra bits before they get to the end of to May, because it has the potential to change things dramatically if we are not careful or proceed with caution of those woundings that we hold, those ultra bits. But to keep looking at them, remember those sextiles to Pluto, they're a call to weed, to keep weeding and to attend and to have discipline in that, but this potential that if we forget about that, it could just boil over and wreak havoc in our lives that we weren't expecting.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And so next month, some of the things that we're going to be looking at is for the month of June is Mercury ingressing into Gemini. We are going to have both a Mercury Cazimi and a Venus Cazimi. Saturn is going to go retrograde. The sun is going to move into Cancer. There'll be a whole bunch of other aspects and things to look at there. Lots of big things happening, but definitely feeling a change of pace month by month as we come out of April now, for sure.
And the opening up of all the planets. So we're all bunched together, but now there's starting that separation, which, yeah, that's an interesting thing. It brings a whole other energy to itself. But something's definitely changed. And I feel that expansion into winter solstice, things move fast, but then by the end of June, everything's, we start to move into sort of retrograde season with Saturn starting to kick off that. And then Neptune will probably follow suit not long after that.
True. Yeah. I'm really looking forward to navigating all of June's transits with you next month. This has been
Yeah.
so much fun.
So much fun. I hope this has been really helpful for everyone. And yeah, jump onto our Patreon. This is really exciting. We have lots of offerings there and different tiers of support and different offerings of discounts to our other work. Becky, what do you
Yeah.
got coming up? Speaking of which, your other work, what's happening?
Yeah, well, definitely go and check out our Patreon, which is the Sentient Sky. There are ways for you to support our work as well as to engage in extra offerings, like Yvonne's amazing monthly transit worksheets, which will help you apply the transits to your own chart. I offer an electional chart once a month. And I'm going to do one of those, which is just available to everybody this month. And it's for the 3rd of May. So do listen to that sooner than later if you're curious about what that is, to share an elected moment in time, because it is a particularly beautiful Venus moment. So it's a moment in which we can really attune to and connect with the energy of Venus. But what I'm doing at the moment, so I'm always available on Saturdays for one-on-one sessions in naturopathy and folk herbalism. As a practicing astrologer, so looking at natal charts. I'm also doing tarot readings at the moment, and you can book through my website, which is rebeccaholly.com.au. Yeah, at the moment I'm booked a few weeks ahead of time. So if you can't find a spot, email me and I can pop you on a wait list. I'm currently teaching a combined astrology and tarot circle. Usually I have an astrology circle and a tarot circle, but this term we were like, why not do both? And so we're doing both together. We've kicked off term 2. It's been really beautiful so far. If you're interested in learning astrology and or tarot with me, you can again head to my website, rebeccaholly.com.au, and look at the events. I'm super, super excited to be speaking at Wise Women Gathering in New South Wales over May the 17th to the 28th, which is in Webbs Creek, I think about 90 minutes out of Sydney. And my presentation is called Coming to the Tarot Triggered, a 9 Swords Prayer. So I'm so, so excited to be gathering with other like-hearted humans to talk about the tarot And the last thing I have that I'm offering, oh, there is so much going on right now. Holy moly, you'd think that there were 7 planets in Taurus in my 10th house, right? The last thing I'd love to let you know that I'm offering is that I have my enchanted herbal medicines in my shop, which you can find at rebeccaholly.com.au/shop. You can also have a look at my new in process Instagram page, which is Witch of Little Hills, and there's dots between those. So it's witch.little.of.hills, which I love saying out loud. That's really fun. But I have flower essences, some of which were astrologically elected. So have a look through the descriptions to find some very, very potent astrological materia there. I have elixirs and a new hawthorn berry elixir dropping soon.
Beautiful. And I have started to open up again. I run a Temple of New Wheat, which is the goddess of the stars, Egyptian goddess of the stars. So the Temple of New Wheat Astrological Study Group, which is a 6-month intake that it will be opened again at the end of May, which is freaking exciting. It's like a 6-month journey. It's you get your one-on-one reading with me with the transits, and then you get to journey with us and our beautiful group where we share our experiences of the transits as a really embodiment of the charts as we move through each month. Also next month in June, actually, I run a Inanna journey, which is based on the myth of Inanna, a journey through the underworld, which is all about letting go. It's such a Chiron thing. It's all about letting go what no longer serves our soreness and our pain, to sit in the void, and then we rise up again. And that's a 5-month journey that's starting at the end of June, sorry. And yeah, it's a 5-month journey, and that's online. But also we're going to be offering it face-to-face for the very first time here in Wurrung country in Ballarat. Super exciting. Also open to private consultations, one-on-ones of deep dive astrology readings, as well as holistic counseling. And yes, I think that is it. Very exciting. Lots going on.
Oh my gosh, there is so much going on.
So much going on.
This has just been so much fun and such a pleasure. I'm so glad we're doing this together. And I hope that everyone else has really enjoyed our journey through May. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what resonated. We'd love to hear anecdotes of how things unfold through May. We'd love to hear what didn't resonate and what felt strange or weird or what you couldn't connect with. Like, jump on our Patreon. It's a co-created community. We'd love to hear from you there.
Yeah. And I think we're going to put this on YouTube as well. So if you are liking what you are seeing, thumbs up, support us, subscribe, write comments, what Becky just said, what resonate, what you liked, what you wanted to see more of. Like, we want to hear from you. We want to really invite you into this community of ours, of astrology enthusiasts and love for this work. And yeah, as we navigate this new terrain that we find ourselves in after all this Uranus energy that's changed and shifted us in ways that we are yet to see, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. And remembering too that Australian astrology is something of a niche, right? So if this has really resonated and you've loved this, please share it. We really rely on our small but loyal and loving community to share the word of what we're doing so that it can reach the people that it needs to, and so that we can be supported in continuing to do this work. So thank you to everyone who has listened this far. Well done you, well done us.
Yes, absolutely. It got a bit weird in the middle. I think that was the Sagittarius full moon just playing havoc on us. This is like, whoa, I think we're taking off to the stars there for a bit. Anyway, we're back, and enjoy that journey of that lunation. That's going to be a bit special because it was really special for us, and all the things that came in between. Thank you so much for listening to us and following us up until now. Well done. Congratulations that you got this far. And we'll see you back here next month for our June report.
See you soon, everybody. Bye.
Blessings. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Sentient Sky. Follow us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thesentientsky for episode updates, our contact info, events and offerings, and to connect with us in our co-created community. Thank you so much to each and every patron for their support and presence within that community.
Deep gratitude to our ancestors, guides, and to the green world of the earth and the cosmic sky. May we ever be acting in service to the highest good of all beings. We pay our deepest respect to the First Nations people and to the elders past, present and emerging, to the Wadawurrung and the Jurjur Wadawurrung country people. We give great thanks to the continuing connection to the land, sky, sea and their communities. We also like to express our deepest of gratitudes to our own ancestors and to the land, sea and sky of their origins. Both of us would like to thank our teachers, families, friends and communities that support us and inspire us in this cosmic work. Especially big love to our beautiful children for whom this is ultimately for.
Great thanks to my brother, Daniel Van Horsen, for allowing us to use his original music, whom you can find on Facebook for details on his offerings as a session musician and sound engineer. Until next time, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Much love. Bye.